the Auckland Port occupies prime land near the CBD. As land values have soared over the years, so have the number of ideas and proposals to use the land for other things. At the same time, the amount of trade New Zealand does with the rest of the world, both imports and exports, has grown, creating ever more demand for the ports. With a limited amount of space to grow, interest in finding larger plots of land upon which the port can expand has also increased. One of the more prominent proposals for the Auckland port future is the Ports of Auckland Development Proposal, published in 2013 by the Auckland North Island Strategic Alliance to determine trends in demand for merchandise trade through the upper North Island ports through the capacity of key port and port-related infrastructure to manage this demand and to form a view of potential infrastructure investment requirements. There have been several arguments over the location of Ports of Auckland. Proposals have been thrown about to both move and not move the port. The primary arguments to not move the port boil down to a few key issues. First, the other upper North Island ports, including Tauranga and Northport, don't have the room for Auckland's growth in addition to their own future growth. Second, a new port would have to be built on currently undeveloped or natural coastline. When we have a perfectly good port already, some argue that this is tantamount to environmental vandalism. Third, building a new port would cost about $4 billion just to replace what we already have. That's a cost of nearly $8,400 per ratepayer if the project stayed on budget. Fourth, moving the Port of Auckland would result in more trucks on the road, which would lead to climate-changing greenhouse gas emissions growing and additional transport costs. Consumers eventually would have to pay more for imports, and the added cost would also make our exports less competitive. Finally, 70% of the goods handled by the Port of Auckland come from or go to Auckland anyway. With the port's current location, there is less travel by truck or train and lower carbon emissions. The argument not to move the port is thus that the current location is efficient and green. Additional arguments against moving the port rely on advancements in technology. For example, people have been arguing that the Port of Auckland will soon be at full capacity, and we urgently need to move the port since 1989. The argument stems from early analysis that showed that the port would be about 30% larger than it currently is, and that even with that larger footprint, it would be running at its capacity. Neither of those predictions have come true. The port did not grow to the forecasted size, and it is not yet running at its full capacity, despite growing demand. Those that want the port to stay in its current location argue that this is an example of how capacity can be extended by working smarter with technology. With the current technology employed by the port, many believe that the ability of the port to meet demand can extend well into the second half of this century. New innovations over the century could extend the port's useful life even further into the future.
I've talked about containerization on this channel before, but this video is different because it includes the phrase 100-ton autonomous robots. New Zealand is a long way from almost everywhere else on the planet. Humans only reached here about 700 years ago. If you look at a globe of the Earth in almost every direction for thousands of miles, there's nothing but ocean. Which means that the ports of Auckland here and the other ports like it all around the country are vital to keeping New Zealand running.
So the fantastic thing about the ports of Auckland is that we're right in the middle of the city, but the downside of that is that we're quite constrained. We're not in the 60s when you could just pave over everything and build out into the harbour. We can't expand anymore, so we've got a fixed footprint. Not so great when your city's growing at a massive rate of knots. When you get your head around the fact that you can't do the old-fashioned things like just keep reclaiming land, it becomes quite an exciting challenge. how do we put the maximum number of containers through this little plot of land?
Like every other major port in the world, almost all the goods that arrive or leave here are going to be in a standardised shipping container. For incoming goods, once a container has been unlocked from the ship, these giant key cranes take it and move it down to ground level. And then it's moved to a holding area by a straddle carrier, ready for a truck or a train to take it on the last miles of its journey. Those straddle carriers look like something out of an old Jerry Anderson show, but they're real. They weigh 70 tons before they even pick up a container, and the newest straddle carriers, which are being tested right here, right now, are automated. Fully loaded, that is a 100-ton robot just moving around at speed.
We're automating while still operating the terminal, and it's an absolutely crazy thing to do, but we have to do it because it's our space limitations. So it's a bit like you're having open heart surgery while you're still playing tennis. So we're now getting robots which can work much more steadily and stack higher and stack closer together, and so we can get a lot more capacity out of our same piece of land.
It's really, really precise. The ASTRADs can stack containers with an accuracy of a couple of centimetres. That actually can pose a problem because the wear and tear on the pavement is always in the same place at the same time. So we've got a fairly cool solution to that, which is called stack shuffling. So in a manned terminal, of course, for the straddle operators to know where to put the containers, we paint lines on the ground. Over a number of years, that wears out the pavement. We get ruts where the straddles drive repetitively and damage on the asphalt where the container corners land all the time. And of course that then requires repair, which is disruptive and expensive. So with ASTRADs, they refer of course to an electronic map that they need no lines on the ground. So that enables us to then move the container stacks just a little bit, and that spreads the wear and tear on the pavement over a much longer period of time.
GPS isn't quite precise enough for this job, and there's a lot of flat steel surfaces that could reflect or block those signals. So there's a local positioning system installed here as well. Synchronized transmitters all around the port work like miniature GPS satellites, and equipment on each straddle carrier triangulates the location using the light speed delay from each one, which is literally sub-nanosecond precision. They don't just look at the timing signal itself, they track the phase of each transmitter's carrier signal.
The locator system is our system for the so-called positioning of the machines. We have these two antennas on top of each machine in order to also be aware of the orientation of the machine at each moment, but it's a local system. Everything which is directly related to the main safety of the straddle carrier is on the straddle carrier. Also the navigation itself happens on the straddle carrier.
Whilst we're automating a large part of our operation, we're actually keeping people in a part of it. So we'll actually have interactions between manned straddle carriers and automated straddle carriers, and that's never been done in this way anywhere else in the world before. The system has multiple layers of safety. The first one is the simplest, which is we put a big fence around the terminal, we keep people out. Beyond that, then we've got a computer system that monitors where all the machines are all the time, so it's both the manned and the automated straddles. It manages the interactions between those machines, and it's a standalone fail-safe system. And then as a sort of last layer of defense, the ASTRADs have laser scanners on them, which will detect the presence of an obstacle in front of the machine and stop it before there's a collision.
We've got a different type of automation here. We have straddle carriers that are only automated in part of the terminal. And the reason we've done that is, again, the throughput. So our crane drivers are really fast. So under the crane, which has got lots and lots of steel, it's really hard to get those signals and automate. So by keeping manual operations underneath these cranes here and then automating the yard, we get more capacity. The robots do the really boring stuff like moving containers around, digging out the bottom one to put it on a truck, and the people do the really tricky stuff. You know, the technology will no doubt improve, but for now, that mixture of people and robots is the perfect mix.
Shifting and unpredictable global economic trends will also have an impact on demand for the port. Rapid innovations over the next several decades will have an impact on the port's capacity. These two phenomena make it difficult to predict when, or even if, the Port of Auckland will be at full capacity. With the Ports of Auckland development proposal, we focused on arguments to keep the port in its current location. In 2016, a new port study called the Port Future Study was commissioned by the Auckland Council to recommend a long-term strategy for the provision of facilities to accommodate sea-based imports and exports, and cruise industry deploying to and from Auckland and the region in an economically, socially, environmentally, and culturally acceptable manner, while taking into account competing uses for citizens of waterfront spaces and the impacts of various options. This is all a long way of saying that the study was undertaken to determine what we should do with the port so it continues to support the region without significant negative impacts. Listed are the findings from the study. The most important ones include the existing port will not be able to accommodate the long-term freight task and crews on the current footprint. There is a need to secure sufficient berth length in the multi-cargo area for the port in the medium term. In the long term, other existing North Island ports will be unable to cope with the totality of the Auckland freight task, together with their own capacity requirements. And finally, the cruise industry facilities should be retained and improved in Auckland's city center. Comparing these findings with the Ports of Auckland Development Proposal Study, we can find a number of consistencies, but also a few contradictory findings. Unlike the do not move findings highlighted from the Ports of Auckland Development Proposal, where preserving the current coastline and using technology to continue expanding the capacity of existing ports was emphasized, the Port Future Study suggested a number of potential new locations for ports. The study used multi-criteria analysis to reduce the number of potential sites to 14 locations, using 90 physical, cultural, economic, social, and environmental criteria. These criteria were assessed and cost-benefit analysis was used to compare the potential sites. The application of this analysis reduced the number of potential sites by half. While we investigated just a couple of studies, including the Ports of Auckland Development Proposal and the Port Future Study, the ports have been subject to massive planning efforts over the past decades. In addition to the two studies that contemplated the future of the port in relationship to Auckland and New Zealand's broader future needs, the more internally looking Ports of Auckland 30-year master plan used as its starting point the Port Future Study, and then used feedback from Aucklanders and information from importers, exporters, and shippers to shape a plan they think would meet the needs of Aucklanders both today and tomorrow.
Hi, my name's Tony Gibson. I'm CEO at the Ports of Auckland. Auckland Council is looking to move the port. Now that's a big job and it could take 30 years. In the meantime, we have to cope with freight demand and make sure you've got access to the things you need in shops. That's why we've developed a 30-year plan to give Auckland Council time to design and build a new port.
Another plan that focuses more on the operation of the port and its interactions with the area immediately around the port is the Port Precinct set out by the Auckland Unitary Plan. The purpose of the Port Precinct is to provide for a nationally and regionally significant component of Auckland and New Zealand's transport infrastructure and trade network. The precinct primarily consists of land and coastal area owned or controlled by Port of Auckland Limited. Development within the precinct is guided by Development Plans 1, 2, and 3. Precinct Plan 1 sets out the maximum height controls across the port precinct. Precinct 2 shows the area named Area A within the port precinct where buildings will require design assessment due to their proximity and visibility from Quay Street and Queen's Wharf. The Precinct Plan 3 sets out the inner and outer noise control boundary. There are several objectives set out by the Port Precinct Plan. The efficient operation, growth, and intensification of marine and port activities and marine and port facilities, including the development of the port's capacity for shipping and its connections with other transport modes. The use and development of non-port related activities and buildings do not compromise the existing or future operation of the precinct. Adverse effects arising from the activities and development are avoided, remedied, or mitigated. Adverse, reverse sensitivity effects on the efficient and safe operation of marine and port activities are avoided, remedied, or mitigated. Buildings adjacent to Quay Street complement and enhance the gateway to the city center while recognizing any functional and operational requirements of the marine and port activities. Public access to and use and enjoyment of the coastal marine area is maintained and, where practicable, enhanced, provided it does not adversely affect the efficient and safe operation of marine and port activities and development of the precinct. The last plan we'll look at is the Waterfront Plan.
Auckland's city centre, where it touches the Waitemata Harbour, has always been an important welcoming point and centre of commerce for New Zealand. Over the past decade, Auckland Council has improved the way Aucklanders and visitors experience the city. Here's what's happening over the next few years. New public spaces to both Lower Queen and Quay Streets. A new ferry basin layout making it easier for more vessels to arrive and depart. Improvements to Queen's Wharf, allowing Auckland to host larger cruise ships. Upgrades to the length of our waterfront Quay Street, making it easier for pedestrians to get around. A new bridge crossing Viaduct Basin to Wynyard Quarter. Plus, an exciting new waterfront space as part of Auckland hosting the America's Cup in 2021, a space that will continue to be used well into the future. Meanwhile, a brand new neighbourhood continues to grow in Wynyard Quarter, and the potential of the future of Wynyard Point will be realised when the tank farm makes way for a new public space that connects back to Victoria Park and onto the city centre. Once delivered, these improvements will make Auckland's city centre even more desirable and a stronger economic force, both now and into the future.
There are 5 defined waterfront goals. The first one is blue-green waterfront. It means a resilient place with integrated systems and innovative approaches are taken to enhance the marine and natural ecosystem. Conserve natural resources, minimize environmental impact, reduce waste, build sustainably, and respond to climate change. The second goal is to provide a public waterfront. It means a public place for all Aucklanders and visitors to Auckland. a destination that is recognized for its outstanding design and architecture and environmental quality, public spaces and recreational opportunities, facilities and events, a place where we protect and express our cultural heritage and history and celebrate our great achievement as a city and a nation. The third goal is to maintain a smart working waterfront. A smart working waterfront is one that attracts high-value, innovative, creative, and green businesses and investment to achieve a significant leap in productivity. A place for waterfront activity, the marine and fishing industries, water transport, and port activities. Fourth, a connected waterfront. A connected waterfront is a place that is highly accessible, easy to get to and to move around in, where people feel connected to the wider city and beyond by improved pedestrian and cycling linkages, vast, frequent, and low-impact passenger transport, and state-of-the-art telecommunications, and through a supportive community and business network. And the final goal is a livable waterfront, which means the location of leading sustainable urban transformation and renewal in Auckland, the most livable New Zealand central city urban community, a vibrant mix of resident, worker, and visitors and activities, and a welcoming and resilient neighborhood that is safe, diverse, and attractive, with plentiful open space and access to local services and facilities.